Today we're going to meet the brand new SpaceX Starlink Generation 3 router. Let's go check it out. In this video, we're going to go over the SpaceX Starlink Generation 3 router specs. We're also going to provide a how-to install and set up the Starlink Generation 3 router as a standalone unit, and finally explain how to set up a Starlink Generation 3 mesh network. So guys, this I think is fantastic. I did a video about this coming out about a week ago now or so, and it was exciting news because they are moving from the older Wi-Fi 5 into a Wi-Fi 6 new third generation router. I thought that this was really great. I went over a bunch of specs that I thought was going to come out. Now we actually know exactly the specs, and they're even better for the most part than what I expected. So we're going to go through the specs first, and then of course we'll go into how to set up this router as a standalone. And then, like I said before, we're going to set it up as a mesh network, because a lot of you guys really want a mesh network. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a network that feeds off each other. You have a main router, and then you have nodes or APs or access points, and you can put those all over your business, all over your house. So no matter where you go in the business or house, you're going to have full strength. That's the whole idea of a mesh network. Anyways, one of the great members of this community sent me over an email. His name is Todd. Thank you so much, Todd. And in this email, it shows the unit as well as all the specs and all of the setup and all the stuff. And this is what we're going to go over today, because I think this is very important. If you have a Generation 1, I would say it is now time to move to Generation 3. Now, if you have a Generation 2, you could probably hang out for a minute. All right. Now, this is what the email basically read. It said, as an early Starlink customer, you're invited to a limited launch of the next generation Wi-Fi router. We would love to hear about your experience, including setup, performance, and any other recommendations that you have, as these will be the first routers produced. So this is great. You'll be able to get, as of right now, I'll give you a link, the latest and greatest third generation router. So hang in there. Down below in the pinned comment as well as the description, I will give you that link. It continues by saying the new Generation 3 router introduces Wi-Fi 6 and tri-band radios to Starlink. With the improved range, performance, and device support, the Starlink Generation 3 router will extend your Wi-Fi network throughout your home to provide a more consistent and reliable connection with faster speeds. And this is what I talked about in my last video. It finalizes with the Generation 3 router can replace your current router, and multiple Generation 3 routers can be meshed together to extend the range of your Wi-Fi network. Your new Generation 3 router will arrive with everything you need to get connected to your Starlink. So let's meet the third generation Starlink router. Now, as you can see, the router no longer stands vertically. It lays horizontally on its side. I really like this better. You don't have to worry about the unit toppling over anymore, and it's just simply wider on your desk or on the top of a cabinet or wherever you place it. So this is nice. I do like the new form factor. I think it's great. Now, in the box, you're going to get that Generation 3 router. You're also going to have a Starlink weather seal plug, an RJ45 cover, the Starlink third generation router cable, as well as a power cable and the power supply. Now, like I said before, the third generation Starlink router does provide Wi-Fi 6, whereas the old one only Wi-Fi 5. Now, I told you why that is important in the last video that I did. I'll give you a little link over here. You can refer back to that. I don't want to go over all of it. If not, this video is going to get too long. But Wi-Fi 6 is better. But Wi-Fi 6E is the latest and greatest, and a lot of third-party routers already provide Wi-Fi 6E. Why didn't Starlink put that in here? I don't know. Maybe this has been in the works for a year plus, and they said, let's just stick with Wi-Fi 6. We're still getting faster speeds and the ability to connect more devices to the unit. which is great. This brand new Generation 3 router not only provides 802.11 connectivity, A, B, N, G, as well as AC, it now provides AX. Once again, AX is the, let's call it, latest and greatest, which is going to give you that faster connectivity, more devices, and all the rest of the stuff. So this is great. Also, the new router has a tri-band radio in it, which is a 4x4 MIMO radio, or an MU-MIO, which is a multi-user, multiple input, multiple output radio. Now, one of the things I talked about in my last video is that SpaceX Starlink brought back the Ethernet port. So in the Generation 1, if you didn't know it, there was an Ethernet port on the back of the unit, whereas Generation 2, they removed that port and they forced us as Generation 2 users to purchase a dongle, basically an Ethernet adapter for $25. Well, that is no longer the case. The Generation 3 does have an Ethernet port on the back of the unit, but even better, it has two. So that is awesome. Now, in regards to security, instead of just having WPA, it has WPA2. Now, I personally would like to have seen WPA3 also, but I understand the reason they didn't put WPA3 in it is because not all devices can speak to WPA3. Not a lot of devices have decided to use WPA3, even though it is more secure. That being said, WPA2 is good enough, but I would like to have seen WPA3 once again for future-proofing in the unit, but it's not there. Now, what has also been brought back from the Generation 1 is there is now an LED, a flashing light on the front of the unit, so we know what the heck is going on, and I'll get into that in just a second. Before I go any further, I want to say that if you're still here, consider subscribing to the channel and throwing the video a thumbs up. That would be fantastic. Also, if you're already subscribed, don't forget to click this button over here, so when I go live or when a new video comes out, you will be notified of it immediately. Also, there is a ton of Starlink content in a Starlink playlist I put together over here. About 165, 170 videos. There is a ton. Check those out. Also, grab my ebooks. They are free. Just for you being here, go to JCristina.com/books. And finally, if you just want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little thank you button down here. Click on that. Give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, that's fine too. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be awesome. Now, if you are looking to create a mesh network like I was talking to you about just a second ago, you will be happy to know that you can use your Generation 2 routers and the brand new Generation 3 together to form a mesh network. So if you have a bunch of nodes or a bunch of other routers that are Generation 2, don't worry, you will be able to use them with this Generation 3 main unit. Also, like I was telling you before, it is now able to provide access simultaneously to more devices. So at any given time, it can have up to 235 devices simultaneously getting data from that router. That is awesome. Now, a lot of you have asked me in the past, what type of cables does SpaceX use? And I went through breaking down a dongle, showing you how to also repair cables properly. I did a lot of videos about that. If you haven't taken a look at my Starlink playlist, go check it out. There is a ton. Now, after digging into all of the information, I can now tell you that SpaceX is using an RJ45 pinout that is not the T568A. It is using a T568B. If you don't know what the difference is or you don't care, don't listen. But what this means is the pinout would be white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, green, white, brown, brown. That is the same exact pinout that you would see in a T568B. So keep that in mind. Whenever you're trying to fix a cable, now you know exactly the pinout. Bear also in mind that these are shielded wires, shielded ends, and they do have a grounding wire in it. So if you're trying to replace a cable or extend a cable because you're trying to make it longer through one of my videos. I show you how to do it. Make sure that it is not only a Cat cable, but make sure it is a Cat 7, Cat 8 cable, something that is shielded and does have a grounding wire in it. That is very important to be able to use it properly. Now, how exactly do you install a Starlink Generation 3 router as a standalone unit? So starting out, what you want to do is unplug your old router from your power source. Then you want to unplug the router from the Generation 1 power supply. That is also known as a PoE injector. If you don't know what that is, it is called a Power over Ethernet injector. What that allows it to do is take power and run that power over a single wire. So this way your dish doesn't need to have a power wire and an Ethernet cable. The power is being provided over that one Ethernet cable. The next thing that you want to do is leave your dish plugged into your PoE injector because we're going to use that going forward. Now you want to plug your Generation 3 router power cable into the power adapter. Then plug the other end of the power cable into the router, and then finally plug the power adapter into the wall. That will boot up your router. The next thing you want to do is plug the provided Ethernet cable into port 1 on your Generation 3 router, and then the other end of that cable into the white port on your Generation 1 power supply or PoE adapter. Next, go into your Wi-Fi settings on your device, let's say your phone, and now connect to the SSID or the network name called Starlink. Once you're connected, you can look at your router to see what the lights are doing. And I talked to you guys about this light or this LED before. If your light is white and it is solid, what that means is your router is actually connected to the internet. Everything is perfect. Now, if that light is blinking white, what this means is it is trying to connect to the internet. It is not yet connected. So hang tight. It is still working on it. Now, if your LED is completely off, that means that your router is not getting power. Take a look at your connections. Also make sure that that connector is plugged into the wall properly. And maybe you need to flip a switch to get that receptacle to turn on. Check that out. Also, if the light is red, this is bad. What that means is that there is no internet connection. That means that it tried connecting, it blinked white a whole bunch of times. It was unable to connect to the internet. That is a problem. Finally, if the light is violet, what that means is that you are currently in bypass mode. Now for me, I use bypass mode all the time, and the reason being is I like to use a third-party router instead of using Starlink's router. Why? Because I like to use a Wi-Fi 6E router. I like to use my own mesh networks, but I'll get into that in just a second. Now, once you have a solid white light, I would recommend getting back into your app and changing your SSID, which is the name. I would change it to something else instead of Starlink's, change it to whatever you want to change it to. For me, it's called Mr. Bevel because that's what I call my dish. Change it to something that just works for you and your family. Also change the password so that when people log in, they don't just automatically get in just because someone drives up to your house and they can just log in and use your Wi-Fi. No, change the password. Also, in the app, you'll find there's a ton of other features, standard features as well as advanced features. There's a lot of good information and things that you can change, but I'm not going to get into any of those in this video. If not, this video is going to get to be too long. Now, even though the third generation router does have faster speeds, the capability of having more devices simultaneously on the unit with a Wi-Fi 6 in comparison to Wi-Fi 5 setup, which is AX in comparison to AC, I would still recommend using the Ethernet ports on the back of the router for any type of computer or TV or maybe third-party router that you want the absolute fastest interaction between the Starlink router and it, so that you also do not have any type of interference with Wi-Fi. While Wi-Fi is great, a hard line is always the best. Now, what I would do instead of directly hooking up into this router a TV or a computer for that faster interaction, those faster speeds, what I would do is connect a third-party router, just like what I do now. While this is a great router, I would rather have my own router that gives me greater functionality. Now, what does this all mean? Well, one of the functions would be like QoS or quality of service. That basically allows you to bandwidth shape Let's say you want to say something like, my kids can be only on during these hours, or they can only use a limited amount of data, or they can only this, that, or the other thing. This you can do with a third-party router that you cannot do with any of the Starlink routers. Also, maybe you want to lock down certain traffic and you don't want that traffic to be able to go through your network. You can lock down that traffic. Maybe you want to provide more bandwidth to a certain application or a certain device. You can also do that, which is great. And maybe you just simply want more added security. Well, the third-party routers will give you a little bit more security and a little bit more control over the bandwidth and what goes in and out of your network. Now, there's much more things that you can do with third-party routers. I can do other videos about this, but for me, I would always use a third-party router. The reason being, I'm anal retentive and I want control over what's going on. I just don't want it to be open, so to speak. Now, the next thing is mesh networks. How do you set up a Starlink Generation 3 mesh network? I do love that SpaceX Starlink did make the process very easy, but I will take you through it and give you some tips and tricks about doing this. Now, what is really great, and like I said before, is you can mix and match. So if you have Generation 2 routers as nodes or as APs or as access points, you can use those and you don't have to buy additional Generation 3 nodes or Generation 3 routers. If you guys didn't know it, that's exactly how SpaceX builds these mesh networks. The way it works is you have your main Starlink router that they send you in the kit. Any additional Starlink router that you purchase, Generation 2 or Generation 3, the main router will recognize it, but instead of as an additional router, it will recognize it as an AP or an access point or a node that it's going to use to form a mesh network. Now that is awesome. Now before I get into how to do this, I want to give you a quick tip. When you place these nodes in your home or office, make sure each one of the nodes is close enough to the main router. If the distance between the main router and the node is too far, what will happen is you will get a degraded signal. A degraded signal will provide you with a degraded speed. You will get slower speed. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that they are close enough. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that in just a second. So let's get into putting this together. So the first thing you're going to do is plug in one of your nodes. Now, I would recommend doing one at a time instead of just plugging them all in. That's just the way I do it. So plug in one of them and then go back into your app. Now in the app, you're going to simply add a node. It will automatically find that node or that extra unit sitting out there and saying, hey, do you want me to add this into a mesh network? You're going to say yes, please do so. Now, like I said before, the app will show you the signal strength between that node and the main unit. Now, it has 3 different color ratings. You have one color which is white, you have yellow, and you have red. If the color between your router and the node is white, you're great. That means that the connection between that main router and the node is strong enough. It is not losing any signal. Now, if it is yellow, at that point, your signal is degraded, and what that will mean is you will possibly lose packets. You will also lose speed. So what you want to do is make that yellow line turn white. How do you do that? Simply by moving that node closer to your main router. Once you move it a little bit closer and it turns white, you're golden. But make sure that that line is white. If the line goes red for any reason, what that means it is disconnected. You are too far away. Move it in closer, or possibly the power is out on that node. Check the power. Finally, if anything goes sideways and you look at your router and that LED is red, meaning that there's no connection to the internet, the first thing that I would suggest that you do is power cycle the unit. How do you do that? You simply unplug it, leave it unplugged for like 10, 15 seconds, plug it back in, let it reboot and reacquire the satellites. While the router is reacquiring the internet or the satellites, you will see the LED flashing white. If it then becomes solid, you know you have an internet connection and everything is copacetic. But if it goes red again, now we have a problem. At that point, the power cycling didn't work. What I would recommend doing next would be a factory reset. Now, this is very simple with a Generation 3 router because SpaceX brought back the reset button. With the Generation 2, they removed it and they forced you to plug and unplug and plug and unplug like 6 times in a row. It was ridiculous. Well, Generation 3, they figured it out. People complained enough. There is now a reset button. That's all you have to do is take a paper clip and hold in that reset button for 5 to 10 seconds, then release it, and it will now reboot the system once again, but factory settings. So all of your settings will be lost. The unit will now be called Starlink instead of the SSID that you called it, like mine is Mr. Bevel. You will have to rename it, put a new password in, and any other setting that was in there, you will have to reconfigure. This also includes bypass mode. If you switch your Starlink router into bypass mode and now use a third-party router, the only way to undo that is to do this method of a factory reset. And that is exactly what happens here. So if you need it back into bypass mode, you will also need to reset that once you did this factory reset. So I'm really excited about this brand new router. To me, I think that it's great, and it shows that Starlink is advancing. And what that also means is the Generation 1 routers are not going to be as compatible as the Generation 2s will be with the new satellites. And we had a debate about that. We talked about this in one of the last live shows that I did, the last JC Lives. So I do believe that they will provide a means to go from Generation 2 to Generation 3 routers, but just simply not yet. As you can see, this Generation 3 is using that PoE injector, whereas the Generation 2 do not need a PoE injector. Why? Because it's built into the router itself. This router obviously does not have that power supply internally to it, which is very interesting. Now, moving into a Generation 3 to replace a Generation 2, how they're going to do that, I don't know. They might need to provide a PoE injector with a Generation 2 to Generation 3 kit. This would be interesting. Now, I think this would be great because by the looks of it, you should be able to run this with a DC power supply in comparison to AC. If that is the case, the Generation 3 is going to be much better for anyone that's in an RV or any type of mobility that wants to run it on a battery and not want to have to convert DC to AC to be able to power their Starlink router. Do I know this for 100% certain? I don't, but I think this is going to be the case. And if it is, this is fantastic. Anyways, I hope you found this video of value. If you have, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of this. Like I said before, there's a lot of Starlink content on here, about 170 videos. You can check them out here. If you liked it, throw the video a thumbs up. That would be very helpful. Share it with your community, Reddit, Facebook, wherever. Share the video, share the channel. That'd be awesome. Don't forget to click this button once you have subscribed, so when I go live or when a new video comes out, you will be notified of it immediately. Also, if you just want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little thank you button down here. You can give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, that's fine also. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. If you want to get any of my ebooks, they are 100% free for you being here. Go to JCristina.com/books. Once again, JCristina.com/books. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the years. And hopefully there's something there that you might like. And if there is, please pick it up and support me and my family. That's it, guys. I'm out of here for another vlog. Many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you in the next one. Love you all.